let's transition into it then, if you feel comfortable and ready to. I was just generally, so like my idea of this is just generally like we've just been having a chat, just to kind of do that. I've got a few questions to kind of like guide the conversation a little bit and just give it a little bit of a catch up. But most of all, it's just about kind of you and what you do. And kind of like you can, you know, say about your podcast and any other kind of, I know you do campaigning and all of that. And it would just be interesting to kind of like get to know you a little bit. And yeah, does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, was there anything particularly that you wanted to touch on in the video at all?
No, I think like I said before, I'm quite open about things, and it's just good to be able to talk about these things. And obviously we've had quite a few similar experiences in terms of the stuff that we've tried to do as a result of going through mental health problems and stuff. So it's good to be able to speak about that with that shared experience, because as you know, like if you're going through something like that, it can be a very lonely, isolating place, and you can feel like the only person in the world going through it, and there's like no one out there who's going to understand you, or there's always I don't know about you, but I've always had that feeling where I'm just like, you get to a position where you just feel like you're not good enough, and you're scratching around your head thinking like, what can I really do to make it better, or how can I channel this in a more positive way rather than it consuming me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you've like channeled it. Right, before we get too deep into conversation, do you like to just introduce yourself and tell us just like a little bit about who you are, maybe where you study and things like that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Adam, I'm 21. I'm from a little town called Fleetwood, which is about 7 miles north of Blackpool. Everyone knows Blackpool, so that's why I usually just make the link, because most people haven't heard of Fleetwood, so I just make the link to Blackpool. And I currently go to uni in Chester, so I'm in I've just finished my first year doing psychology at Chester. So yeah, it's been a bit of a big life change, obviously moving from a small seaside town to a city for uni, and although it's not that far away, it's about 80 miles away from my house back home. It's obviously a big change up in sticks, moving from one place to another, and especially during COVID times as well. That's been quite a transition, but it's been good to do that and just challenge myself. I think I'm just one of those people that I don't like sticking with the same things. I like challenging myself to do things. Like, obviously it's not always going to happen, you know. If you're going through something mentally, there's going to be times when you're not going to be able to do things, and that's perfectly okay. But I think on the most part, I suppose it's the perfectionist in me. I always want to be striving to do more and improve, and I sort of realized that now is the time to go to uni, because like, I'm obviously being 21, like most people my age will be in their third year of uni if they started when they left college and stuff. But I went through, so when I left school of sixth form, because of my mental health problems. I didn't really know anything about mental health at the time. Like, I'd gone through a lot of stuff at school that I didn't really know about. We weren't taught about mental health in school. There wasn't really any information about it. So when I did leave, I still didn't know what was going on. And then when I went to sixth form, the problems resurfaced. And then, so luckily for me at the time, my mum wasn't working, and my mum's gone through depression and mental health issues for most of her life. And because she wasn't working before I was going into college, she would see me having panic attacks and going through really severe anxiety before going in, and she was the first one to notice it. And we made the joint decision to go and speak to a GP about it, and consult with the college, you know, to see if there was any way of them keeping me there, really. Mm-hmm. But when we approached the college and had a conversation with a member of staff there, I remember them just being very dismissive of it, and they basically said to me that I can either carry on as normal or just leave. There wasn't really any alternative. They weren't willing to put anything in place for me really to make my life a bit easier, you know, whether it's doing like classes on my own or spending more time in the library doing work, and or you know, just other things that they could have put in place to help. They weren't really very supportive of it. So at the time it felt like the only decision I had to make, and obviously when I made it I felt like a massive failure, and like I couldn't manage it, and I didn't really know where to go from there. But I think looking back, it was probably the best thing I ever did.
Yeah. And I feel like in that circumstance, it wasn't you that failed, it was the college. In fact, they failed in their duty of care, and they failed in their like legal responsibilities as well, right? Because employers, educational establishments have a legal duty to make reasonable adjustments for people with mental health. So it's like really they shouldn't have had a choice, if that makes sense. They should have made those arrangements because it they have to, you know. But it's really kind of soul destroying when people don't support you and don't really help.
Yeah, and particularly with that being my first experience of it, and finally getting a little bit of an understanding about what was going on, and then for that first interaction to be so dismissive and non-understanding, I think that was just, yeah, it was a lot to take in. And like I say, it felt like the only decision I had to make. But in a kind of roundabout way, I'm glad that they did that, even though that doesn't really make sense. Like, I'm not glad that they treated me like that, but I feel like if they'd have made more adjustments, it was more like that I would have carried on and it would have got worse, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you took some time out. Like, how did you spend that time then?
Well, that's when I got into campaigning. So, like I say, the day that I left college was the first day that I saw my GP. And then I think within like 5 minutes of seeing my GP, I was diagnosed with social anxiety and depression. So this was December 2016. So this is like nearly 5 years ago now. And then I remember the first few months I wasn't really doing anything. I didn't have a job. I wasn't really doing anything because I didn't really know what to do with my life. I wasn't sure what direction to go, and it was a very, very dark place the first few months. Like, I probably barely left my room for about 2 or 3 months. Like, I just didn't do anything really. And then I did a few other things. Like, I did an internship at a local college and did work experience and stuff. But I didn't really enjoy it. You know, I was sort of doing those things because I felt a bit under pressure from my family and other people to get back to doing something. So yeah, it was it was good in a way because I was able to get back out there again and stay a bit more active. But it wasn't until I got involved with campaigning and speaking out about my mental health issues that it started to really improve, I would say. So I got involved with the campaign called Time to Change in, like, I think it was April 2018, I think. So I was following campaigners and stuff on social media. I think it was Twitter at the time. And I came across a post by someone. I can't remember exactly who it was. But they posted something about Time to Change. Obviously, they were involved with it. And I think they posted a link to their website or some sort of article that they'd shared. And I just went and checked out the website because I was quite intrigued by what it was, and I just wanted to have a little look. And then I sort of, in the minutes that I was browsing through the website and all the content and stuff, it just caught my eye really, and it was something that I had to get involved with. It was almost like it just came at the right time. And from there, like, I got in contact with someone. So there was basically in our area, like, Time to Change had hubs all across the country, and we had one in Blackpool, but it was coordinated by Lancashire Mind. So, like, members of staff at Lancashire Mind were working on the project in our area. So I got in touch with a lady there called Jane, who I'm still in touch with. and we met up in, I think it was just a Costa or somewhere, and we just met up and had coffee and just spoke about how I could get involved with it and the stuff that we could do moving forward. And yeah, I suppose I never really looked back from there. I just started to get involved with it. Started off doing events and things like that. She allowed me to take control of the social media channels and, promote stuff in the local area of things that we were doing. And then I think we got invited so they were doing like a hubs event. Like it was so all the time to change hubs from the north and the south. There was an event for the south, an event for the north.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we got invited to the one for the north in Newcastle. And we got invited to do a talk about all the work that we'd been doing in Blackpool and stuff. And that was my sort of first experience of doing public speaking through campaigning and stuff. Which was quite a weird one, because when I was in school, like I remember we had to do a piece of coursework where we had to stand up in front of the class and just speak about, I think we had to speak about our hobbies or something, and we had to speak for like 5 or 10 minutes in front of the class.
Something in the curriculum where we had to like talk, do a presentation, yeah.
Yeah, and it was the most nerve-wracking day of my entire life. I can't, obviously now looking back, I know it was severe anxiety, but I remember at the time just feeling absolutely the dread that washed over me going into the room. And then, when you get into the class and you know what's coming, and it's like they're calling each person up one by one, and you're just waiting for it to be you. And then when my teacher called out my name, just that my stomach turning into a battle. It was just hot. It was horrible. And then I went up and did my talk, obviously, and I remember just standing there with the paper and just shaking like a leaf. And then the feeling of relief when it was over. Like I feel like there's not. That's probably the moment in my life that I'm most relieved of something, when it's over. And I think that was just sort of playing in my head when they asked me to do it. But I decided to say yes, because I was like, I didn't want to, at that point in my life, just starting to get into something that I enjoyed, I didn't want to turn down the opportunity to do something that could be quite good. And I sort of wanted to get over that fear as well of speaking in front of people. And this was a much bigger room as well. Like when we did it at school, there was probably about 30 people in the class. And then this one, there was probably, I don't know, like 60 or 70 people in the room or something. And obviously to some people who are used to doing public speaking, that's not a massive amount of people to speak to. But yeah, I remember at the time doing that one, I was very nervous, but then when I did it, I felt like when I got into it, it was like a completely different person. And it was something that a lot of the stuff that I've done following that has been speaking about my experiences in workplaces. And originally I got it through other people, like certain opportunities like that. But then I started to take the initiative and contact places and ask them if I could come into their workplace and speak about it. And just developing that skill of being able to speak in front of people and share my own experiences has been like one of the best things I've ever done. And just that feeling as well of going in and doing it, like overcoming a fear as well, but the reactions you get from other people afterwards in terms of you've spoken about something. And I remember I did a talk at a housing association. Like I did it to 2 separate groups of members of staff. And there was one occasion when I did it, and after the talk, there was these 2 ladies that came up to me who'd I think they both had young children, or they'd recently had babies or something. And they came up to me and were just talking about their experiences of postnatal depression and stuff, and just people being able to, like, when you've spoken about it, people being able to come up to you and share what's on their mind, which they wouldn't have done before. And obviously it's quite a unique feeling when you've just met someone realistically. Like I met them about 10 minutes before, and then they already felt comfortable sharing that with me. And I think that's one of the best things that you can do in opening up like that. I think, the reward that you get from that is, I think it's hard to describe really.
Yeah.
And just other things that I've been able to do as well, like especially through Time to Change, and I was lucky enough to be on TV in October, so I did a piece with like like I was just in my room at uni, like it was in October, so I just started uni the month before, and I just got an email asking if I wanted to like record a piece with ITV. They're doing a segment on male mental health, and they asked me if I wanted to record it with Dr. Alex off Love Island and one of the other Time to Change champions. And the plan originally was to go to London and record it, but because of COVID, obviously we weren't allowed to do it. But being able to do it over Zoom and just seeing yourself like on TV, I don't know, that was just quite a surreal feeling, because I never thought I'd get the opportunity to do something like that. And just less so about the TV, it was just more the message of being able to be involved with that as well, like the fact that other people could have seen it and it could have helped other people. I think that's more the feeling that you get, and obviously you'll be able to relate to when you can help other people. Like, it's such obviously it doesn't remove the feelings that you get and the difficult times that you go through, but it can go a long way.
Perhaps a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, obviously I wouldn't want to go through certain experiences again, but without those experiences, I wouldn't have been able to get involved with something like this, and being able to think of it from that perspective and just say, like, it's easy, isn't it, sometimes when you're in the mindset of just being like, I wish I was a different person, I wish I had a different brain, or I wish I had a different mindset. But I think, like you say, it can make it feel worth it at times. It's like, yes, I've gone through this difficult thing, but it doesn't have to hold me prisoner for the rest of my life. Like, I can use it in a way that can benefit me and other people. So,
because I mean, the fact that you were diagnosed with social depression, like social anxiety, and you've gone up and you've spoke in front of people, that's a huge thing. And it's like, seeing that improvement in yourself can be can help your self-esteem, I think, which in turn can help your mental health. And it's like you said, I relate to loads of things you say about like your journey. Funnily enough, like, we have a bit of a similar route, I think, and coping skills too, interestingly. Because it's like I said to you, my mental health issues started around kind of 16, 17. And I think that's a really common age that mental health issues start showing themselves. And it's such a difficult time in your life, isn't it? Because you don't have much autonomy over like your life and the choices you can make, things like that, but you still rely on others a lot. And dealing with kind of like mental health issues, you can just think like, what the hell is wrong with me? But I don't know if you felt the same, but kind of like going through, as I've got older, obviously the issues and problems are still there, but I at least understand them and have a bit more insight into why I feel certain ways or how to cope with certain ways.
Yeah, I think you just as you naturally get older, you start to learn more about yourself, don't you, and how you can cope. Like, I'm never going to say I'm great at coping with everything, because there's definitely times when I've coped in destructive, unhealthy ways. But I think doing stuff like that, I'm a lot more self-aware, and I know what works well for me, what doesn't. And I think in the long term, that's going to be a massive benefit to me, because you know what to stay clear of and what can help you really. And not only the fact that, as you mentioned, when you do campaign and you speak out, it's that massive sense of achievement that you get from it, and overcoming fears and stuff like that. But the people that you meet through it as well, with the shared experience, and I've met a lot of my closest friends through doing it, and people that I still keep in touch to this day. Like I say, Jane, the woman that I met originally, and she got me into campaigning. Like, without her, like, I owe a lot to her in terms of the development I've had and being able to go to uni. And it's just, I don't know, it's just linking things together. And it's like, without that person, or without that event happening, like this wouldn't have happened, the things that followed wouldn't have happened. And yeah, like I remember I got involved with campaigning, and like me and Jane spent a lot of time together going out there and doing events. And although I was a volunteer and she was a staff member, like we became like close friends. And it's even the age gap as well. Like she's a lot older than me, but being able to go through those shared experiences and stuff like was a massive thing. And I remember like within a few months, like we'd become close, you know, going out and doing these events and stuff. And then she ended up moving to Holland with her partner. But even since then we've kept in touch and stuff and things, and I've been able to update her on things. And it's amazing how in those 3 years or so since we met, and obviously she's moved away and stuff, like how much things have moved on, and how much life has changed. And I think it's kind of scary, isn't it, when you reflect sometimes just how quickly things can change. And when you are in that difficult place, it's like, what can I ever do to get out of this? Like, it's never going to improve. But then within no time, like something can come up that can completely change the course of your life, really.
Yeah, I mean that like you. It's funny that like that's always the thing that people say, isn't it? That it gets better, and you'll get through this and all this kind of stuff. And when you're in it, it's the last thing that you believe at all.
Yeah, exactly. And
like, well, like it's never going to get better, you know, whatever. And I feel like people can say it over and over again, but they're just, when you have that, you have to, like, I don't know, kind of cling to it even if you don't fully believe it. Oh, I think I did.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to live it personally. Like you say, like I remember when I was first going through it, like everyone was telling me that same thing, like, oh, it's going to get better. It doesn't feel like it's going to get better right now, but it will do. And then you don't, like, just naturally having mental health problems, you're not going to believe people, because nothing in your life at that point is going to make you believe that. If you're going through a lot of shit, then you're probably not going to believe someone's going to say it when they say it's going to get better. So I think you always have to experience it firsthand, don't you, to realize that it does. And then remembering it, isn't it, when you, because obviously it's a massive, it's cliche, but there's so many ups and downs. It's not getting too high when it's going well, and not getting too low when it's going bad, and it's sort of keeping that
balance,
that level balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a difficult one. Yeah.
I feel like your first panic attack, or your first depressive episode, or your first kind of whatever, is always the worst, in that you haven't got any lived experiences of getting through it before. But it's like, at least when you've had that experience, you can, well, one, you'll know some coping skills probably by that point if you've got through it before. And two, you can think back, you know, I've survived this before and I know it gets better. But I also, on the flip side, I also do get it. One, it gets exhausting, right? Keep relapsing. And two, I think I get kind of this, like, oh, this is never going to end. And I feel like a bit of a failure if I start relapsing again. Or I've done everything, I've tried everything.
Yeah.
So it's like, in some ways, the first episode is the easiest. And some people will only have one episode in their life. But for people with kind of relapsing, complex, chronic depression, or anxiety, I think there's benefit. There's like, it gets easier, but in some ways it gets harder as well. Yeah, it's like quite it's a journey, mental health. Again, how cliche it is, but these things become cliche because they're true, right? Usually.
Yeah, you do feel a bit corny sometimes saying them, but I think, as you mentioned, there's a reason they are cliche, because they are so true for so many people. And it's like, there's never going to be someone out there that goes through something, they feel they have an up, and then it's constantly up from there. Like, it's never ever going to work like that. And I suppose you've just got to recognize, haven't you, when you're going through a difficult time, and but it doesn't make it any less of a person. It doesn't make you any more of a failure. It's just something that you're going through, and there's no reason why you can't get back to feeling better again because you've done it so many times before.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, I totally relate to kind of campaigning and volunteering and stuff as a coping skill. It's probably my number one coping skill, to be honest. Because one, it's, you know, when you're at your lowest, it's a reason to stick around, right? If people rely on you, you are, you know, putting good things into the world. You know, there was some Saturdays, for example, when I was running my club for the kids, that their club was the only reason I got out of bed, because I couldn't think of like the kids going without. So having that not too much obligation or you crack under the pressure, but having a little bit of obligation and kind of like responsibility to other people can be really helpful. I also think that's like why pets are a really good like coping skill too, because it's like you get out of bed to feed them because you have a responsibility to something outside of yourself.
I agree on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you feel like you're making a difference, it's really hard for that depression to like really fully seep in, I think, and get to that dangerous zone. You can still feel low, you can still feel bad, but if you are contributing something to the world, that's something to cling on to. And at your lowest, or at my lowest, I found that like I need things to cling to, and the volunteering has always been like something for me. Mostly I worked on like social mobility, so kind of getting like low income students to university, or to professions or whatever. And then I kind of started working a little bit on neurodiversity because I have dyslexia. And then it's only really been within maybe the last year, only within the last few months really, that I've started talking openly about my mental health, because it feels almost like more taboo from being from a low income background, more taboo with dyslexia. But it's like I talk really openly about it now, I'm quite comfortable. And once you kind of put it out there, I mean, you don't necessarily have to put it out publicly, but people say talking helps, right? It definitely does. Just make it lose its power, I think, a little bit by talking about it, especially publicly.
Yeah, how has the reaction been for you on the most part from you opening up? Has it been really more positive or negative or experience?
Generally really, really positive. So I have quite like a professional network. So I have like 2,000 people or something on LinkedIn. And I have a job lined up for the civil service and all that kind of thing. And it got to the point where, really, I didn't have a choice, but to be honest, at least with some people, because I had to ask the civil service to defer my job for another year because of like mental illness, and I had to talk to my university and get the year out and all that kind of thing. But I just decided to kind of go publicly on my LinkedIn as well about it, because I was like, one, I haven't replied to messages for months, and people might just think I've gone off the radar, I'm being really rude or something like that. Two, I really won't be the only one, and I knew that logically. And I shared it, and I think like the post got like 100 and something likes, and everyone's like really like thank you for sharing and all of this kind of thing, and just positivity really. I haven't received much negativity. And also I kind of have an attitude of like, if somebody doesn't want me working for them because they know I have depression or they know I have anxiety, then quite frankly, I don't want to work for them. And they're losing out on, the skills and things like that I have. So how about you? Have you generally had positive or negative reactions to your mental health?
I think it's been more positive, but I think there's never going to be, even in a current world where the understanding and the stigma of mental health is much less, the understanding is more, the stigma is less. I've still had those negative experiences, and it's not necessarily been from the people that you expect, because sometimes you expect it to be from the people closest to you, because obviously they're the people you're more likely to tell. And I know a lot of people have had stigma from their friends and their family and stuff, but I think mine's more come from, like, my most negative experience of it was from a mental health professional, and that was sort of a very strange experience. And that's something that's I've told a fair few people about it. Like, I spoke about it on my own podcast as well, and that was a really strange experience, because it was one that I never expected for obvious reasons. And I remember at the time I was seeing the home treatment team, and they were coming to visit my house. Like, I was still living at home at this point, and they were coming to visit like every few days, and all the staff that I'd seen up to this point were great and very understanding. And then I saw this one guy, and I was telling him about my experiences of suicidal thoughts and how bad they'd got in the months leading up to that. But I remember his reaction was just, I think I said I was obviously talking about the suicidal thoughts, and he said something like, "But you haven't done it, have you?" And that was sort of that was
it very.
And then and he followed that up by saying that I needed to just get outside and have fresh air and all the ridiculous things some people can say. Yeah. I had a similar experience with a GP who told me that I needed to get more exercise and stuff like that. And it's just like, I don't know. I think it just beggars belief, knowing that there are people working in a profession that attempts to help people, and they can have these ignorant, naive attitudes, really.
Yeah. But actually, the fact you say it, it's like probably the most kind of contentious conversations I've had, and difficult conversations, have been people from the kind of medical profession. And it was kind of like in December, I was in crisis really bad, and it was very dangerous actually. And I feel like it took a lot for them to take me seriously. And it kind of got to the point where it was like, do I have to actually end up doing something for anyone to take me seriously? And that kind of feeling, which is incredibly dangerous, obviously.
I think that's a common thread, isn't it, for a lot of people?
Yeah, it is, definitely. But I feel like it's like you said about men's mental health previously. I feel like there's definitely a difference as well between like how the way women and men are treated. And like, it's so ridiculous, but I feel like people treat certain mental illnesses like their gender. Do you get where I'm coming from? Like,
yeah, no, I get you.
Yeah, because like, if a woman is more, there's been studies, and so you might know if you study psychology, where like women are more likely to be diagnosed with like hystonic personality disorder, and then like men are more likely to be diagnosed with like antisocial personality disorder. So it's like, I've had some really, really awesome professionals too. I have, but I have had to fight to get help and fight to be taken seriously.
I think a lot of it does come from harmful, old-fashioned stereotypes, really. Like you say, people being pigeonholed depending on their gender and the mental illness that they think is most relevant. And it's like, I feel like I've definitely had difficult experiences because of my gender, and there have been times when I feel like it may have been different had I been female. Not to say that it's easy for women by any stretch, but I think in terms of this idea that men shouldn't speak about their emotions, and it's some sort of weakness, or it's something for people to treat them differently for it. But I think it's definitely been challenging in that sense. And I think, like you mentioned before, I think, to me, like, although I've got a diagnosis, I think there's a lot more than meets the eye, and I think it's something that hasn't been investigated properly or to the degree that I want. And there have been times when I felt like they haven't taken me seriously, and it's like, and like I say, with that guy, it was almost like he said, like, oh, because I hadn't attempted to kill myself or I hadn't already killed myself, then it was okay that I felt like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, like, it's normal and common to feel that way, but actually, unfortunately, it's a normal and common to kind of have suicidal ideation and stuff. And I understand that there's varying levels of like danger, right, of feeling that way. Even in my life, I've had times where I'm kind of just like passively suicidal, if that makes sense. And there's other times where I can actively say stockpiling or something like that. And I understand, like, from professionals' point of view, it might be difficult to tell the difference, but I feel like every time that somebody brings up, you know, thoughts of harming themselves, it should be taken with that, like, utmost seriousness, even if it's like even just kind of small passive suicidal thoughts, because if you catch them early, then they often don't get worse, right? But it is at the moment like the NHS is only interested if you're in crisis.
Yeah, and I think it's so sad and frustrating and disgusting, really, how many people do end up taking their own life, and with further investigation, it's found that they've been failed or they've reported how they've been feeling and it's not been taken seriously, and that's a very, very common thing for people to have taken their own life, and the amount of warning signs that people are given and nothing is done about it. And it's like, how many times can they say sorry and we should do better for it to be taken as serious as it, like, you know, the amount of times that it's happened, and yet people are still being failed or turned away when they feel that way. And it's like, well, it's all it is to me. It just feels like false promises a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
It's saying we're going to do this, going to do that, but it's just words, isn't it? Really, like, anyone can say anything, but the actions is what really speaks out. And
funnily, the best support sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like the best support I've had has been from third sector, like charity. Like the DBT was given to me by mine, and my psychotherapist is a volunteer.
That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So most of the help I've got is through third sector, which they're excellent. But it's like the intensive CBT I've been offered, I'm on like a 6-month waiting list, and it's like, just suffer for 6 months or whatever. It's like I've wanted to see a psychiatrist for a long time. And your point on, like, I feel like I need an assessment, a proper assessment, because, you know, they don't really fully know what's going on with me. But you have to really, like, I don't know, it takes such a long time to get these things. And Cambridge, where I live, has no provision really for like personality disorders. So there are gaps in the system as well. Sorry,
cut off then.
That's all right. No, I was just saying, like, I feel like you know, that Cambridge has there's so many gaps in the system. Like, for example, Cambridge has like basic no personality disorder provisions, so they just like shift them onto mind, which, you know, mind are awesome and they're doing great things, but at the same time they're not the NHS, they're not medical professionals.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the really kind of like frustrating thing with personality disorders as well is they say you're untreatable or whatever. How can you say that somebody's untreatable? I just think that it's awful that people are actually turned away at times of crisis. It's awful.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly damaging. Like you're saying, it's not good to expect a charity like mine to be supporting people, because, like you say, they're not trained mental health professionals. They're people that want to help people, and they do a great job of doing that, but they've got no medical training in supporting people. And I think sometimes people, when they don't know enough about charities and stuff, I remember when I got involved with Times of Change, like, people were asking me, "Oh, can I get help through them?" Like they didn't understand what it was. If that makes sense. Like people get the wrong impression. Like they didn't understand that Time to Change was a campaign. It wasn't a charity. It wasn't a mental health service, and people get the wrong idea.
Yeah.
And like I say, as much as they do great work helping people, you can't expect them to treat people with very complex issues. That's what mental health professionals are for, and it's almost like they're not fit for purpose anymore.
Yeah, well, they have never really been fit for purpose.
Yeah.
And obviously we went from like institutionalized mental health treatment to community mental health treatment. But that was decades ago. And now we haven't made any more developments since that. Because obviously, in most measures, community treatment is best, but there's just no improvements, nothing. You get, they say mental health is as important as physical health, and we all know that logically, but it's definitely not treated that way, which is so frustrating.
Yeah, it would be an ideal world, wouldn't it, where they are treated on a level playing field, and like you say, it gets publicized as they are equal, but in reality, most of us, especially people that work or campaign in mental health, we know that's obviously not the case, and I really hope that in the coming years it gets the respect that it deserves. But I'm not holding my breath for it, but it would be fantastic to see the necessary improvements.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, that's why your campaign is so important, right? Because you have to put pressure for these things to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But kind of like moving on from that. So obviously, I know we've both experienced like issues with mental health professionals, which I think everybody says, and everyone's frustrated. So like, how have you managed your own mental health then, despite kind of not having access to the resources that you probably you're entitled to, really? But how have
Sorry, can you just say that again? I hate to be a pain, and just couldn't really hear you.
I was just saying, like, how have you kind of managed your mental health despite not having access to like the services that we all should be entitled to, really?
That's a good question. I think, like you mentioned before, campaigning has been a massive coping mechanism for me, and particularly with lockdown and not being able to do that, that's been something that I've missed hugely. So I've had to find other ways and to cope with it better. Obviously, I've still continued campaigning on social media and having set up the podcast and with my website and stuff. But I think the way I cope with it best is being able to confide in other people. Like, I'm not someone that I find it very hard to keep it to myself. Like I used to be able to, but now I'm just people that with me. Like it's very, very obvious when I don't feel very good. Like I'm not someone that can hide my emotions. So when I do feel that way, I feel much better when I confide in someone that I trust. If it's someone, a friend or a family member, that's something that helps me an awful lot. I like reading books. I think that gives me that solitude and that escape from things that might be going on in my life, even if it's just half an hour, just getting away from how I'm feeling and just focusing purely on that and not thinking about anything else. I think that can be a massive plus. And yeah, just getting distracted and immersed in a different world and the book that you read, and I think that can be really beneficial to me. Exercise as well. I've always enjoyed exercising, sports and stuff. I played a lot of sport when I was younger, which I stopped because of my mental health. But then in the last few years, I've started going to the gym and stuff like that. So that's been a massive plus. And yeah, and even if it's not going to the gym, like going out for walks and stuff and being out in the fresh air, like I always feel better when I'm active. Like it's just something that I need for my own brain, really. But yeah, I suppose those are the main ones, really.
It's like
trying to.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say finally, just trying to eat as healthy as possible. Like I'm lucky in a sense that I've never had a bad relationship with food like other people might have done, and I do hold a lot of sympathy for people like that, because I can't imagine how difficult it must be to go through an eating disorder, or to have a difficult relationship with food. But as much as I haven't had that, I've had anxiety before about what I eat, and, you know, worrying about weight and body image and stuff like that. I'm sure that's something that everyone's gone through at some point. But just trying to eat as healthy as possible and stick to a routine of eating meals at similar times. And yeah, just because obviously when we think about food and eating healthy food, we think about physical health, but I think it's the links to your mental health are so connected as well, and I think that's something a lot of people forget.
Yeah, because I think people forget that the brain is the most complicated organ in your body, right? It needs that nutrition and things like that. It's so interesting to hear you talk, because it's like looking in a mirror in a way. Because obviously when the pandemic hit, I actually grieved losing all of my voluntary work.
Yeah.
Because it was just my whole life, and just everything like I said, existed for, really.
Yeah, it's almost like losing. It's almost like losing a friend. It's like something like when Time to Change, the campaign ended in March. Like the funding was cut, and after I think it had been around for 13 years, and it was the longest funded project by Comic Relief and National Lottery Fund. And I was even doing a bit of reading the other day, and I think on the top 20 public health initiatives of the 21st century, Time to Change was 13th in the list of any public health initiative in the 21st century. So that just shows like how big of an impact it had. Like, even just for me, how big of an impact it had. To imagine how far reaching that must have been, and to be able to get involved with that, and how much it helped me, and then to have it taken away, it was almost like, it was like losing a friend, really. It was a lot to take in, and like you say, it was almost like a grieving process, being able to get over that, and just how do I put it? I don't know how to phrase this. Just being able to, just get over it properly, and take it in, and be able to move on from it, because, you know, when something is such a massive part of your life, you can't imagine it being taken away. So when it does, you have to find other avenues to go down.
Yeah, and we both like went down similar avenues, funnily, because, you know, I got into building websites, social media, obviously videos, everything, and we had to adapt. But I think that's sometimes the thing with people with mental health issues; they're better at problem solving.
Yeah.
And better, because we have to be, right. We don't really have a choice. And better at adapting and things like that. But how do you find like going virtually? Does it give you as much purpose, or is it?
I think I'd be lying if I said I enjoyed it as much, because I'm just someone that likes interacting with people in person, and getting out there. Like I say, being able to go to events and training and public speaking, like obviously that doing that virtually and other things, it doesn't have the same. It just doesn't have the same effect, in my opinion, anyway. But like you say, we've had to adapt and do it in a different way. So I found like I've only just recently set up the podcast. Like, it's something that I've wanted to do for a while, but that's been quite nice to be able to speak about stuff like that on a platform, and to do that with one of my good friends as well. Like, that's been quite nice. I spent more time on my website than I have done like in the last few months, which has been nice, because it's something that I probably neglected over the last year since I moved to uni. Obviously, getting into doing assignments and stuff, that's been my main focus.
Yeah.
So the last few months, being able to write more and update my website and make it more professional and stuff, that's something that I've always been quite proud of. Like, as someone that, when I first got my website, I had no clue how to build a website. I had no idea how to do this. So when I did it, and with the product that I've got now, and how it looks, like, it's something that I'm very happy with, and it's something that I'm happy to share with other people, because I think it's something that I'd like to think it's something that people would appreciate, because I think it looks quite professional. Like, it's not something, I feel like it's something that a business would have, rather than me using it for my own personal use, like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like it looks
yeah
designed nicely, and I feel like a similar way about about the website I've been working on. I was looking at some of my old pages actually earlier today, and I was thinking, oh my god, I've got so much better, and I just know how to do it more, and it looks nice, and you know, it's satisfying, isn't it? Like, learn.
Yeah, like, I'm so glad I took the plunge to do that, because I remember when I decided I wanted to set it up like a few months after I'd got into campaigning, because I'd wanted to share my opinions and talk about the stuff that I'd been doing online, and get more of engagement, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But when I first started doing it, like I say, I didn't have a clue of how to do it. So I'm glad I persisted with it, because the first few weeks of trying to do it, like, there were so many times when I wanted to give up and just be like, nah, fuck this. Yeah. So yeah, when I got around to being able to do it, like, it was a massive achievement for me.
Absolutely, it filled my time. Like you say, I'm definitely a people person as well. Like, I like to see the people I'm helping, because I'm more of a volunteer really than a campaigner. But you need both, don't you, in making change, if that makes sense. It's like,
yeah, you do.
Yeah, because I was a crisis volunteer with Shout UK, and that's like more my kind of role. But at the same time, so I like being properly on the ground in the middle of the issue. But it's also really important to campaign and put pressure on those in charge. But both are really like social kind of activities, and we all got isolated with COVID. And I'm so excited to kind of start on the ground volunteering again.
Yeah,
it's within our grasp now that things are like reopening. Also, you said about books. Books are one of my coping skills as well. So I read a lot. Well, at the moment, I'm reading a lot of prehistoric fiction.
yeah.
Because my degree is psychology and behavioural sciences. So I do half psychology and also do like half of something else. And I chose biological anthropology, which is basically human evolution, which is all really, really interesting. So I like reading the prehistoric fiction about like Neanderthals and humans and things like that. And it takes me back. It takes me to, like you say, a different world. It also reminds me of like everything had to go right for us to exist as we do. And it makes me, you know, like ponder, how do I think Neanderthals would have behaved and acted? And I also read a lot of like mental health, self-help books and things like that as well. Like at the moment I'm working through like the dialectical behavioural therapy skills work, which is really good.
Yeah.
But I was reading a lot of non-fiction, but recently I've got into fiction, and it's such a good coping strategy. What kind of books do you read?
That's a good question. Like, I've read a lot of self-help books, and as much as I love self-help, and I think it is really good, that I wrote a blog that I published, I think it was yesterday, and
I saw,
yeah, it was just that was it was about the sort of negative sides of self-help, and I didn't want people reading that to think it was me completely criticizing self-help, because I know how brilliant it can be for so many people, and it's definitely helped me. I think I've just I think it was more along the lines of getting too immersed in it, because I think in the past I've read so much material of it, and there's so many conflicting messages and pieces of advice that it can clog up your brain, and you're not really sure what to believe, and it can make you feel like you should be doing better all the time, and it doesn't really allow you to feel like you're doing anything well, because you feel like you've got to be constantly evolving 24/7. Or like I say, it's I have read a lot of self-help. There's been plenty of books that have really helped me, but I think I'm just trying to be more aware and selective now what I read, because like I say, it can be very conflicting and it's difficult to know what to believe and what you're absorbing. And if you're absorbing that much information, like how do you choose what's relevant and what's not? So yeah, a lot of self-help that I've read, a lot of sports books, autobiographies, and non-fit. Like, what else have I read? I like crime and history books. Like, I'm a bit of yeah, I like learning about that sort of thing. Serial killer stuff and things like that. Fiction, crime books as well, like thrillers, like usually they contain ones where there's a murder of some sort or some creepy event. I like them sort of fiction books. But yeah, like stuff along those lines, mainly crime, sports, self-help, history, that sort of thing.
I think that a lot of psychology students are interested in not like morbid things like true crime and or crime and things like that, because you like to understand humanity, right, and the mindset of people, and well, I do anyway, and I feel like
I agree.
Yeah, definitely. And I also have found, I don't know if you have, that like lots of people who study psychology have mental health issues because they kind of got into it by trying to understand themselves and what they're going through.
Yeah, I think that is very, very common.
Yeah. What are you hoping to kind of do in the future? Like, do you know?
I think no, I think my aim really is to continue the campaigning work that I'm doing, but in a paid sense. So
nice.
I'd love to work at a charity like Mind or Rethink, somewhere like that. Would be the dream for me, or just to widen my horizons a bit more. Like I'd love to set up my own charity in future. That is
literally my ultimate goal in life.
That would be incredible. And then obviously, getting other people on board and stuff would be fantastic. And that's why meeting so many good people with shared experiences is good, because you've got similar goals and what you want to achieve from life. So that would be incredible. But if not, I'd love to just work at a charity like Mind and continue trying to help people, doing anti-stigma campaigns, speaking out, social media stuff, all that stuff.
Keep busy.
Exactly.
Yeah, brilliant. Would you like to just like say your podcast name and your blog name?
You can. So it's Breaking the Stigma, and we're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. There may be a few others called Breaking the Stigma, but it's the logo is just like 3 caricatures, and they're like holding up placards with BTS on it.
Yeah, we will put the link in the comments section anyway.
We're a very new podcast, but hopefully over time we'll to attract a bigger audience, and we just keep speaking out about different things. There's obviously so many different things to talk about in the mental health world, so it's a great thing because there's so many different things to talk about. So
awesome. And then also your blog, of course, as well, which is also Breaking the Stigma, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's breakingthestigma.com, and it's got so there's a dash after breaking and there's a dash after the, so it's like in between, there's 2 dashes in between basically.
So I'll put that on the under the description and things like that.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to stop the recording.